Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this podcast series on security talks. In continuing the conversation on security, in today's podcast, we take a unique approach. We will discuss a case study, and we have got three incredible leaders from Asia who will help us with how they would respond to a potential crisis scenario that emerged as a result of a particular security breach. Allow me to first introduce the three speakers who are joined us today. First up, I will have Pak Rasdi Rashid, who is the head of information security for a leading telecom operator in Indonesia. Welcome, Pak Rasdi.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I have Siva Subramaniam, who has 40 years of experience predominantly in the customer experience space. He has held a multitude of roles. He has led BPO organizations in several geographies. Today, he runs his own organization in Philippines, and he has particularly set up an organization in response to the challenging scenario that BPO service providers have faced. He has set up an organization predominantly with work-from-home agents and is a unique value proposition to serve customers around the world. Welcome, Siva.
Thank you, Manoj. Appreciate it and glad to be here.
Excellent. And I have Srinivas V. He is the senior director with Nokia Software. He brings with him several decades of experience in telecommunications, IT, and today he leads the security portfolio in Nokia. And thrilled to have you with us, Srini.
Thank you very much, Manoj. It's indeed a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Excellent. So allow me to quickly summarize the case study that we're going to discuss today. The detailed version of this case study is available on the website along with this podcast. I will just read out the abridged version of the case study, and we will get each of the three distinguished speakers to first comment on how they would respond to this particular case. After that, we will open it up and we will let the experts maybe discuss, challenge each other's approaches, or maybe collaborate, or even help us come up with a better solution at the end, towards the end of this session. So allow me to quickly read out the summarized version of the case study. COVID-19 has had a significantly large impact on the aviation industry. Across the board, there were cancellations of tickets, particularly for many airlines. Many airlines were forced to not even give cash refunds. There was a sudden spike in customer grievance calls to call centers. Airway, which is the company in this particular case, is one of the leading players in Asia, is very significantly been affected by this crisis. Its current contact center partner does not have the bandwidth to manage the high volumes of calls that are coming into the call center. To deal with this new age digitalized call center, Rapid Infotech was looped in. It had just rolled out a new AI-based contact center solution. Lower cost and quick deployment were the primary reasons why Airway chose to partner with them. All relevant private customer details were shared with them to make the query resolution process smoother. 3 weeks into the contract, a data breach was detected by Rapid Infotech. The data might have been leaking for a few days now. On getting to know of the breach, Airway immediately froze the contract. Millions of user records were found to have been leaked from the system, including data on passports, contact details, travel history, and a select few financial credentials. So, for the participants on this case, they will be the CXOs of Rapid Infotech. So, as the CXO of Rapid Infotech, the questions to them are as follows. 1. What are the steps that you would take in potential chronological order to ensure that the damage is limited and all systems are backed up? 2. What is the checklist that you would potentially follow from a security or an IT network infrastructure standpoint for contact centers to fight this growing and range and frequency of cyber attacks? And third, what kind of a business continuity plan should be put into place to deal with such a situation in the future? Since we are dealing with contact centers, I think it will be maybe appropriate to start with Siva. Siva, you run a similar setup like Rapid Infotech. and you have put this solution together in a very quick period of time. How would you go about dealing with this?
Thank you, Manoj. I do want to, before I answer the question, although we are not here to discuss the airline itself, there are some fundamental flaws in the way that the airline approached this outsourcing business. First of all, a budget carrier should typically automate as many processes as possible and rely much less on a cost center or an agent-based program, because a contact center is a cost center and it costs the company a lot of money. So there are issues. And Infotech also pride themselves in an HR-based organization. As you know, HR is a very confidential information. And so they should pride themselves in security, which obviously they didn't in this particular case. And the other part is, I don't know how much time and effort that Flyaway or spent on doing some due diligence on the security protocols of this rapid Infotech. So that's not what we are here to discuss. But in terms of Infotech itself, essentially, I think the first thing we need to do is do a root cause analysis to find out where the leaks are coming from. I don't know why the airline shared all the passport details, etc., to Infotech, because that is only required at the time of check-in and not at the time of bookings. But that's water under the bridge situation, and so that's the case that we are dealing with. Root cause, because it is not a system-wide problem. It's just a handful of people who are breaching the protocols that is set by the company. So we need to identify and find out where the root cause is and how badly it's affected. It is no secret. Every contact center does have some form of breaches happening all the time, because no matter what you say, people want to be heroes and try to do these shortcuts and do things, and it happens in every types of business. So the root cause, to understand where the problems are, is first important. Once you identify the root cause and the players involved, you need to understand the demographics of the people. Where are they based? Are they in a group? Is it a single person doing it? Is it multiple people doing it? What is the motive for this particular person? So if there's required, you involve the legal authorities like a CID, or in the Philippines, we call them National Bureau of Investigators, NBI, so that they have a group called cybersecurity teams, where they can actually look and monitor the pieces. In a work from home environment, key part that all clients are concerned about is the security. So there are tools that you can actually monitor the agent's screens and how they access it if the client wants to give access to the person at home. Tools like Time Doctor, which actually does monitoring of the desktop to see if the person is going out of their areas, what tools did they use, where were they, all that kind of stuff we can capture. In some cases, some of the work at home people actually also install a CCTV to find out where these guys are working, whether they're taking any cameras, any equipment that can take photos, etc. So that is a key. What we have done is, what I would do is move all these tools and desktop applications away from the agent. And the way you do that, and what we have done, is put it in the Google Cloud. So the agent actually uses a Google browser and goes into the Google Cloud, and all the desktop tools of the client is in the cloud. So it also avoids any latency. It also stops any security issues from the cloud perspective. There are multiple suppliers. Microsoft does it, and IBM does it, and all those guys do. We use Google platform for all of those things. And that also provides a report on who's accessing what tools, where are they going, how do they stop them, are they using social media, all that kind of thing. What you won't be able to do is, unless you put a CCTV, is say if they have any tools close by taking photos of the customer data, etc. The telephony that you actually use needs to be also improved. There are so many telephony systems in this place. What we use is a cloud-based telephony system that also restricts them from doing many things in the telephony system as well. With the calls coming through, we can track and monitor to find out what these agents are doing. Again, you cannot prevent agents taking photos of the database unless you have a CCTV, but you're taking almost everything away from the control of the agent, including sharing, uploading any information on their own desktops, all taken away, and we just put them on the cloud itself. So really, it's at the end of the day, it's a matter of putting a lot more controls around it and managing it. There is also a process where the client can use what we call a step-in rights. So instead of allowing the BPO company to manage the center, the actual airline itself can step in and take over the leadership and management. But somebody working at home, they can't control. But somebody in the office, they can control. But fundamentally, there is a flaw in the way that the security has been set up in this particular organization. It begs the question, if they are doing HR, how do they even set up this kind of situation? And work at home, for us, when we select agents to do work at home, we get them to do an UCLA test on the speed to make sure they have the minimum sufficient speed to do it. We ask them to do a 1-minute video on the workspace they are in and introduction on what they do, kind of stuff. We do medical checks to make sure they have any historical medical situation. We check on references to see if they have any breaches, they've been fired from other companies, etc. So the fair amount of those activities need to take place before you hire somebody at work at home, because you are not in total control of somebody working at home. There are so many options and so many opportunities for these guys to breach the security, no matter how much you have put controls in. So I'll pause there for any questions or point.
Excellent. What about, let's say, now this situation has happened. As you look ahead, what would you do from a business continuity plan to deal with such a situation in the future?
Yeah, the traditional business continuity for call centers has been a standby site, but post-COVID, work at home is definitely an option that must have. Like in the Philippines, for example, the government has mandated only 50% of the contact center can be brick and mortar. The rest have to be work at home. So whether it's a CCTV or whether other security protocols, I have actually taken all the things away from everybody's laptops and I put it all in the cloud. So as soon as they log out of the Google browser, they have no access to the client's database. But they can do things whilst they are in the tools. And so it is something that you need to be very careful about and closely monitor. But security folks in the IT department have to have a closer watch. But there will be some suspects that we need to closely monitor, and those have to be carefully monitored. But essentially, work at home is not as easy as you asking somebody to take phone calls from home. You need to have a solid background checks on the person you're actually giving these accesses to, and also whether they are responsible and committed people who can actually work at home unsupervised.
Thank you very much, Siva. We'll come back to talk to you further on this. Next up, I would like to invite Pak Razdi, as the head of IT security of a leading telecom company. You are dealing with large volumes of calls in your call center. You may have similar situation. How would you respond to this as the CXO of Rapid Infotech? Pak Razdi?
As Pak Siva mentioned, Mr. Siva mentioned, if you look at from the risk perspective, if you look at from the how the data being breached, there will be some what you call access path. If you look at from the call center, you will interact with the system itself and the people itself and the infrastructure, even the software. So as Pak Siva mentioned, there will be some components that we need to do some baselining, and then during that time, usually the breaches indicates by some anomalies. There will be some increasing traffic, or some of the component that probably out of the pattern. So those are the cybersecurity team need to look into. They need to look into what kind of damage that have been happened, and then where does it come from, and then where it comes from, and then they need to look at from the access part itself, which one, which component, which access has been what you call breaches, and then they need to look at deep dive what is being compromised, what are need to be looked at, and then how to recover fast. And then in the certain scenario, there will be some isolations. There will be some what you call investigations. There will be some probably digital forensic investigation. And those data that been considered or been suspected as breach, and those application of systems on the network access path that been indicated or been suspected compromised need to be looked into. But in details, they need to look at out of the behavior, the anomalies, and then they will lead to investigation furtherly. Can you imagine if, let's say, on the crisis when it happens, the operation still has to be undergo, and then the investigation has to become, and the service has to be available. So it will be a challenge from the information from the security perspective, how to do investigation without breaching the integrity and then collect it properly. But of course, during the operational time, during what we consider as normal and secure, there will be some baseline. So there will be a lot of quite technical and then quite intriguing. Probably will take some time, and then it's no guarantee that whatever path that we are choosing will be lead into the the correct access pattern, the correct way the breach happen or the breach can come. But those are the situations. But can we look at from the perspective when you're talking about the call center? We need to look at from the three perspectives. The people aspect itself, as Pak Siva mentioned. There will be HR, security, that need to be involved. What will be what the agents will be suspected, and the process itself. What kind of process that happen be vulnerable or have been bypassed? Are the process or the business process have been executed normally, or is there anomaly in that one? And what kind of technology been involved during that time? So those are the things that need to be approached, and then to put a baseline, and then approach it well, and then we look into the anomaly. But in the crisis time, usually the response will be the focus of the management will be focused on the availability itself. So in terms of availability, the service has to be up first. Yeah. So the security will become, for example, if it's crisis happens and then everyone working from home, the proper response will be there are some business continuity management team that have to invite all of the stakeholders, talking about the readiness, what they are need, what they are required to execute these working from home situations. And then one of the most important thing will be how to at least minimum replicate the security standards that happens within the premise, and then now have to be replicated on the working from home. But the idea will be, it's not, it cannot happen instantly, because in some crises, there are no preparations, especially, for example, like COVID-19 like this. There's no preparation for the crisis like this. You have to have response, service has to be up, the service level have to be addressed, and then the security have to keep up, and you have to keep up gradually. So the service and up, a team of the cybersecurity, or whatever stakeholders that need to be discussed, need to discuss and how to make this secure, how to make all of the working from home can be secure. Pak Siva mentioned about using the cloud service. That will be one of the solutions. There will be the other alternative will be replicating some of the standards from the security right now. For example, giving the notebooks to the agents, and then we constrain the connections only connected to the corporate, and only limited to access to the applications. And then by doing that, so there are some systems that monitor and can log into, and then can see what kind of activities the agents can look at. So without using CCTV, that can be achieved also. Or as mentioned Pak Siva, there are some more concerns, and the CCTV have to be activated, and then they have to look at it. It depends on the situation. It depends on the standard of the company itself.
Excellent. And how about moving forward? Now you already have COVID. You have learned from it. Mm-hmm. How would you put a plan to deal with such a situation in the future?
Well, for sure, the call center that usually probably being outsourced and put on premise, and then have to be put on mobile. One of the solutions that can be achieved using the cloud in terms of the fastness of the early adoption of the technical step. But if you look at from the security perspective, what kind of what we say in security, crown jewel, what kind of information that really important to us to protect. So we will protect it along the way. If it's consider the customer data, and then whatever access path from the systems to the cloud or to on-premise to whatever system, the connections to working from home need to be secure, need to be consent. And then the the call agent center will need to be accessed what kind of role they are going to put, or what kind of role that they are running to. For example, there will be some call center that need to access some certain information. The constraint of the application need to be justified, and those will be an IT part or application part. So the clear details with security requirement need to be defined. For sure, the working from home will be the new way. Yeah, will be the new way. So it has to be prepared. And then if the COVID-19, let's say, will be over, and then it's up to us to exercise again, and then to test it again, how fast that we can recover from it, how secure is it, and then in terms of the security, there will be some security testing, like penetration testing perhaps. From the people's perspective, we know about the social engineering, the process perspective, there will be some audit. And then technology perspective, there will be technical penetration testing. So those kind of activities that can put a snapshot about the security condition right now, and then we'll increase it by the time. Yeah.
Rusty, the camera on the notebook, can that replace CCTV?
Yes, there will be, but the angle from the some notebook is kind of fixed, and they can be used by under certain conditions. So yeah, for sure it can be replaced, but in terms of the control, that will be a primary control, and then you need to have some kind of complement control. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Srini, over to you. Thank you very much, Parvazdi. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you very much, Parvazdi.
Thank you.
Right. So there is an advantage and a disadvantage of going last. But the advantage is you can certainly structure your thoughts and you can plagiarize some of the ideas. The disadvantage is you would probably end up repeating a lot of stuff your predecessors have already spoken.
Yeah, you can handle fast learning. You can handle it fast.
Yeah. So basically, I would look at putting a structure to this. Basically, there are three areas that we could look at to secure and make sure that the incident that has just happened isn't going to get repeated. The first aspect, the three aspects are people, process, and technology. Let's take these three and then let's look at what are the safeguards that you really need to implement across these three pillars. With regard to people, I think Siva alluded to this. Hire the right people. Make sure that you run proper background checks. Make sure that you have the right information about their recent past, not even the recent past, even the distant past as well. You need to also educate your employees on a continuous basis. It's not enough to hire the right type of people. You got to educate them not once, not twice, but it has to happen continually, again and again and again, right? That's the most important aspect. The third important aspect is reduce the insider threats, right? Well, how would you do that in terms of people? So it's not just about your employees. If you're talking about the old normal, as I may use the word, you had buildings and there are several people who would actually visit the buildings, whether it is cleaners, whether it is janitorial service, whether it is anybody who's actually having an access beyond 5 p.m. So you got to have the right level CCTV surveillance that's available in place. Now come to the new normal. When you have people working from home, you got to either have some kind of a mechanism where you are monitoring people and who is actually coming to them, whether there is any social engineering that's being done, people standing behind them. So all of those aspects have to be really considered. So one of the important aspects which Siva talked about is using the laptop camera to continuously monitor, but the camera's ability to see, you don't really record the whole period, because then that will actually that will make your total cost of ownership pretty huge. You can't just keep the record, but you got to be having a smart solution that will detect any anomaly. So if you're asking somebody to work from home, then you got to be detecting if somebody is coming from behind and actually standing beside that person. So that's what you got to be detecting as an exception, not the regular norm. So these are the aspects on the people side. Another important aspect which even Siva alluded to is basically how do you check the compliance of your security vendors? Because most of these call centers actually outsource several activities. It's impossible to actually get this work done all through your employees. So you got to depend on subcontractors. So what are the control mechanisms that you are putting in place before you hire a subcontractor vendor? This is something which many organizations miss because they are actually in a hurry to get people on board because they have to address an opportunity pretty quickly. So while ramping up, ramping down, you got to make sure that you follow the right process. That brings us to the second aspect, which is around process. Parusdi talked about this, establishing the right security governance process. And the security governance process involves how do you establish proper access control, whether it is the identity and access management, whether it is the privileged access management. You got to be looking at all these things. Then even you have to establish principles on how to properly dispose the information. So it's not enough to actually determine how to access the information. You got to store the information in a proper way and you got to dispose the information. Siva talked about a very important point around Google Cloud. I think the best practice here is don't store any data whatsoever in the contact center servers. Because if somebody by any chance is able to break into your infrastructure for whatever reason, if he or she doesn't find any data, then the whole process that he has followed, the whole effort that he or she has put in would become futile. So you can at least minimize the damage that is actually occurring to you by not storing any data whatsoever in your contact center servers. That's with regard to the process. On technology, there are quite a few things. Obviously, I could just go on forever, but then there are a few things which I just want to talk about. The first one is make sure that the endpoints are properly protected. The first thing, and we talked about this even in earlier situations as well, endpoint is one of the primary conduits through which any infection can come into the network. So you've got to make sure that the endpoints have the right level of security software. Having the right type of security software is not enough. You got to update it on a continuous basis. So that's the second thing. The other aspect is around restricting the use of portable devices. You have to establish this discipline very well. Whether it is office, whether it is working from home, you got to disable the USB. You got to make sure that any portable device that's actually getting attached to the laptop or to the computer is properly scanned. Or the best way is to actually stop all these accesses, at least from an employee perspective. The third thing is you could actually secure and segment the network, right? So you could use the latest encryption methods such as WPA2, Parusdi talked about the corporate VPN, and you could even segment your corporate network. It doesn't really hurt you if you were to establish additional security and secure your perimeter slightly in a more compact manner by adding 2 or 3 firewalls in an additional way. So you have to establish defense in depth security principles for your infrastructure and network as well. Then look at the standards which are applicable specifically when you are in a contact center environment, whether PCI DSS is applicable. Look for all these standards. Make sure that you follow the guidelines that are established by these standards, and make sure that you get your call center, you get your whole processes audited on a regular basis. Then there are some new advanced techniques that are coming in. For example, you have things like dual tone multi-frequency masking technologies, where people are actually not reading the social security numbers or credit card numbers. You actually link to their mobile phones and they just type the credit card numbers or the social security number, so that nobody is actually hearing these. So even if you store the data in terms of voice messages, you can't really access. So there is a complete privacy that's actually coming into the place. Then you got to establish proper document access controls. We talked about it. Then repeatedly put multi-factor authentication in place. Even people are working from home, you got to have the right multi-factor authentication, so that periodically you are checking if it's the same person who's working or it's somebody else you are working. So that's the other thing. The last but not the least, I think you got to assume that somebody is actually your network is getting compromised on a regular basis. So make sure that you run penetration testing and vulnerability scanning, improve the frequency of vulnerability scanning to a great extent. If you were doing it once in a year, make it thrice or 4 times a year. Make sure that you invest on this. Don't think that this is actually an additional financial burden. Instead, it is actually a mechanism for you to stop these threats from occurring. So you got to really look at penetration testing and vulnerability scanning on a regular basis. So you can establish these safeguards, whether it's working from home or people coming back to work post the COVID situation. You got to look at this issue across people, process, and technology, and you have to make sure that you implement these safeguards.
Outstanding.
I'm just saying, yeah, it's all good points. But Srini, on the PCI DSS, how do we kind of make that work at home though? Because that requires a fair amount of photo material, like for touch cell phones, iPads that can take photos of the data stuff. How do you kind of control that though at work at home?
So I don't think PCI DSS is a standard that's ready enough to actually consider the new normal, which is work from home. So obviously, if you are dealing with sensitive data, the only way to deal with PCI DSS is to stop storing the data in the endpoint. So you got to actually go and access the data from a secure location, and that's where the PCI DSS principles are implemented and followed. And everything else, it cannot be accessed. Even if they are able to access, it's still masked. So you still follow the processes at the centralized storage mechanism that you have. But unfortunately, I am not aware of any specific adaptation that PCI DSS has done to the new normal. And I don't think many people are even prepared for this. So I think all these adaptations will come in the future. But at this point of time, there isn't any that exists.
Yeah. And one of the points, Manoj, I missed in the outset is that you asked a question about what do we do moving forward. If the passport details and any confidential details are required, and Srini talked about the credit card details, the agent can actually transfer it to an IVR, and the agent can actually do use speech analytics to read the message or the details or any confidential information or credit card payment in the IVR, and then the IVR can transfer the call back to the agent when the details are passed, and it's encrypted, so the agent cannot see the details except to see it's been completed.
Pakrasdi, you want to comment a bit on what Pak Srini discussed? Any areas to supplement it?
Addressing the concern of the sensitive or important data, that there are what we call a data protection program. Usually, it's been implemented through the data leakage protection technology. So the thing is, you have to look at the data from the state itself. They are staging whether data has been in use currently. For example, the application been accessed or the data has been viewed, etc. Those are there are quite many control that can be implemented during that time. For example, the encryption can be executed on that one, or the access control, like Pak Srini mentioned, the two-factor authentication to making sure the access is accountable for that one. Yeah, and they are staging with the data in transit. The data in transit, for example, from working from home or the home of the call center agent to the to enterprise, or even from the cloud. There have to be some standardized secure protocol to encrypt all the transmission data on that one. And then there will be a data address where the data has not been accessed, data be transmitted, or the data has been stored somehow. That's Pak Srini mentioned about it. You have to secure it. Minimum, there will be some method of encryption to make sure that it cannot be accessed, or there's some safeguarding to do that one. The important thing would be the safeguarding, because it protects. It's preventive, not reactive. But the challenge will be in this time to balance the condition what we are usually have on the company level, and most of the part will be executed from home. It's not easy to replicate and then to have the same baseline on security level, from the infrastructure awareness, the process, even upon the people, and the fast time. You have to keep it gradually. I think the crisis right now, the COVID now can be put as a exercise to learn what we can improve much more better, and then to gradually increase it. We know that the time is available, but the thing is interaction, physical interaction will be limited. So there will be some limitation also to deploy all the security control. There have to be some new way to approach that one. So this is the exercise, but this is also a real experience of how to improve it. In terms of information security, we don't need to what you call. I'm not saying we don't need, but you have to keep it. But it's more for us to improve gradually and then deliver it fast, and then you're missing a lot of things. So continuous assessment, continuous discussion, a look at from the stakeholders, what will be concerns, what are the new normals, having new baseline. It will be inputs and have some discussion with the stakeholders that can be input to information security and then can be shared to other stakeholders and how to improve it. Because the call center will be related to the people, right? Interact with the people. So the people will be the epicentrum or the area that need to be improved. So that's the thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have really covered a broad range, and I thought Srini did a great job in encapsulating it in a very structured manner for all of us to digest and take it. Thank you very much, Srini, for that. Maybe a last question to all of you. As we look into the future, clearly work from home is going to emerge as maybe one of the ways forward. We all can see the positive benefits on the environment, on the time and productivity, on traffic, many of these areas. So if you are a CXO of Rapid Infotech, where do you see is the innovation opportunity as you look ahead to enable, what can we do? How can you embrace security to be an enabler to thrive and be successful, let's say, as a remote BPO moving forward in the next 5 or 10 years? What are the innovation opportunities that exist, for companies to look at? Where should the leadership of these BPOs look at, So maybe, whoever wants to start first can go first.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about it. I think at the end of the day, there was an old saying that IT is an enabler. So I said there's an old saying that was always around saying IT is an enabler. The people makes the difference in a call center. I think that will change in the future. I think you will see a lot more self-service and innovation come into play. Artificial intelligence today, the pundits are saying only 15 to 20% of the calls can be resolved in artificial intelligence. You will see that evolve over time and more dependency on the artificial intelligence and self-service. Work at home will become a piece, but it won't be a significant amount. I think there'll be head office, probably 10-20% work at home as a backup because of any possible pandemics that can happen in the future. But I think there'll be if anybody who's smart, they will actually look at a lot more automation and self-service. And I think the people are also accustomed to, especially after this current crisis, would be more adaptive to technology as opposed to wanting to talk to somebody. Speech analytics can complement for elderly people who can't use technology. So that is an option as well. But I think, futuristic technology and everything in the cloud, it's cheaper options to do that. I think that's going to be the future, and that's certainly what we are doing right now. Is we call what we call an agentless first call. So basically, all the calls go into an artificial intelligence. If the customer cannot resolve it, that's when it goes to agents, and we have English and multilingual capabilities that work at home. But we are continuously looking at saying how many more things can we put into the AI or chatbot, so that things can be resolved there. It's faster, it's 24/7, it's reliable, it's secure, all this information stuff. I think that's the way it's going to be looking in the future, I think, my opinion.
Yeah, sure. I think we talked about the implications of machine learning and automation. I think use of live chat and chatbots will certainly come to the fore big time. And I think we are moving towards an era where their self-service is going to be the order of the day. There will be less dependence on humans. That's one important aspect which will come into the play. The second one is obviously, apart from machine learning, I think blockchain would make its entry into the transactions to protect the security security of the transactions that are happening, make sure that it's a tamper-proof, decentralized ledger of information that's being maintained with proper level of integrity. I think there are going to be applications of blockchain which will certainly come into the call center industry. That's the second thing which will surely happen. And I think from a security perspective, there will be a lot more research and there will be a lot more automation and anomaly detection, because we are moving away from signature-based detection to anomaly detection. And I think again there will be application of machine learning in this anomaly detection. So if somebody is logging in, is supposed to only look at access specific type of information as an agent, and then if he or she is now starting to move across laterally to access additional information which is beyond their scope, there will be systems that will trigger an alert. So these sort of checks and balances would certainly be put in place by the organization. So there will be a lot more software applications that will be installed at the central site, which will make sure that they are protecting the crown jewels of the organization. So these are some things that would certainly come to the fore as we move forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Srini. Pagrasti, you want to take the last word?
Okay. As Pak Srini mentioned, the last has its own benefits and also. Okay, from security perspective and how they will improve it. If you look at from security perspective, of course, the AI, the machine learning will be one of the tools that, especially from the cybersecurity team, that we need to monitor, to respond, to look at on how, what are the valid incident, what will be the security incident. That will be very helpful for them. And then I think the opportunity will be, this is the time that need to be aware by all, and then of course understand by everything and by everyone. I mean, the time in terms of accessing the resource from the working from home to the corporate, usually talking about the VPN or network access, and then we know that there are some category to share the resources itself. There are network sharing, there are application sharing, even probably the much more granular sharing. So the tendency will be from the corporate, rather than to provide the network access, they will be moved into the application sharing. So this is, of course, aligned with the security aspect, the least privilege. You need to access what you need to access, and the least information that really is based on your requirement. So the applications sharing in terms from the remote access will be one of the things that will be used from now. Of course, there are a lot of aspects from the authentications and the behavior analysis and how to make sure that the endpoints of the people that accessing is quite sanitized and quite hygiene for that one. I think, and then come to that, the automation will be part of it, because the automation and orchestration, they will move into that. They will correlate that one. I think that's it. The thing is, what I noticed, especially on this crisis, the really concern about to make the service available as soon as possible. So everyone is chasing. For example, there are some company that used to have a call center, usually on a certain area, and they have a desktop, and suddenly, they give the call center notebooks, and then the notebooks has been given to them, but the call center probably doesn't have an adequate infrastructure, security awareness, security controls within their home. They probably have some difficult time to access the company resource and how to do that. But from the stakeholders perspective, from the IT, as long as they deliver their notebook according to the security requirements, that will be their job. And then from the business continuity, they look at, the call center is up. But from the security, it's not as easy as that, because you look at from the people that usually facing the desktop, only facing the certain applications, and then they do some instructions, fully instructed, and then now they give us some freedom, and there will be in order to deploy that one, they usually have on IT, or probably the one that you configure, they have some configuration built template, but they're chasing the timeline here. they need to from security perspective, from the risk perspective. Actually, we always look at, hey, what are the normal here, and then what would be the new. So what from your experience, how you achieve it? From me, is kind of how to keep up and then gradually improve the security control rather than to have to almost become a blocker and then, hey, you cannot do that, you have to do this. That cannot be done. That cannot be done. You have to say yes, and then you gradually keep up, and then you improve it. So what is your suggestion and what your experience on that one, Pak Siva, Pak Srini, everyone, I think.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, Christy, is that I taken away all the controls from the agent and allow the agent to focus on what they have to do. So for me, a cloud is far more, the fewer the handshakes in the IT, the fewer the risks.
Okay.
And so I minimize that if I put it in the cloud, nobody messes around with it. It's there. The agent uses more for like a dumb terminal, for a better word, and use the Google browser, go in there and applications, and that's it, end of story. The more you try to complicate by doing the handshakes, whether it's a security solution or some other application, you risk of somebody hacking into it, somebody breaking into it, somebody causing some problems. Whereas we take that ownership away from the desktop, etc., and leave it in the cloud, and only the IT team and the security team deal with the cloud solution, you take away all the risks from my perspective. That's what we have done.
No, I think there's a difference between IT savvy people and there's BPO players, right? I think the call center agents, they cannot really comprehend the importance of security. I really don't mean to be rude to them, but I think it's important that you take the control out of their hands. Unlike, let's say, the IT users who are a lot more savvy or a lot more informed and who can pretty much be trained. The call center agents actually give you efficiency and effectiveness and optimization. When somebody is actually doing this and they have limited expertise, I think it's better that you actually get the system takeover and not give them the right privileges. So that you because mistakes are bound to happen and they are bound to make mistakes. So in case of call center, I feel we should reduce, and I totally agree with what Shiva says, that you should take things out of their hands. It's not like the way you look at business that should help security. It's not actually business, it's operations at a very low level.
Adoption to cloud, and then considering the notebook, even the top-notch one, as a what you call dumb terminal, will be much more easier from security perspective.
And also gives you the flexibility. So if you want to deploy work at home, you have that. In different building, you have that. Just have to get into a terminal and they can access the tool.
Sure. Okay.
Welcome.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. It was an unbelievable hour, little less than an hour of learning. I appreciate everybody's time, and till the next case study, thank you very much.